Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep into Arcane today.
Oh, Arcada. That show's visually stunning.
It is. But we're going beyond the cool animation and fight scenes. We're looking at rebellion and resistance, actually using this academic paper as our guide.
So getting into the nitty-gritty of how characters deal with oppression and all that.
Exactly. And where better to start than with Zaun itself?
Zaun, right, the undercity. I mean, you could argue its whole existence is an act of rebellion against Piltover.
Yeah, the paper talks about that, how Zaun is this rejection of Piltover's control.
Yeah.
They've got their own culture, tech, even their art screams rebellion.
Yeah, that whole aesthetic, those shimmering, almost toxic-looking colors, it's a statement for sure.
Like the environment is rebelling right alongside its people.
Yeah.
And speaking of pushing back, the paper really dives into Silco.
Silco, a classic example of that question, do the ends justify the means? Wants Zaun's independence, but at what cost? The shimmer thing is brutal.
Yeah, Silco's a complex one. It's like he's showing Piltover this twisted reflection of their own exploitation.
Right. And the paper makes this cool comparison, Silco and Echo.
Oh, good point. Both leaders, but totally different approaches to rebellion.
Totally. Silco's more about power, control, almost mirroring Piltover in a way. But Echo and those firelights, they're more about protecting their own.
It's a more hopeful rebellion. They're fighting for Zaun's future, pushing back against Shimmer's influence, too.
Yeah, community-driven. It's not just about tearing down Piltover. It's about protecting what they have in Zaun.
So much contrast there. But the paper doesn't just focus on Zaun, right? It brings up how Piltover has its own internal struggles with rebellion.
Absolutely. Think about Jace. He's trying to change the system from within, bridge the gap with Zaun.
But he hits roadblocks constantly. It shows that rebellion can be this quiet struggle, too, even within the halls of power.
Right. And then you've got Caitlyn.
Oh, Caitlyn's a great example. Coming from privilege, but questioning everything she's been taught about Zaun.
She's rebelling against her own upbringing and those ingrained Piltover prejudices.
So rebellion's popping up everywhere in Piltover, just in different forms. And then there's Jinx. The paper calls her this chaotic, individualistic rebellion.
Jinx! Her story is so tied to trauma, she's not really fighting for a cause, more like rebelling against her own pain and the world that failed her.
That whole powder to Jinx transformation, like her very being is a rebellion against the life she was supposed to have.
But it's destructive, right? The paper highlights that. It's rebellion fueled by pain, and it hurts everyone around her.
So we've got these different sides of rebellion on display, with Arcane not shying away from any of it. It's really complex.
And that's what makes it so interesting. It's this nuanced look at how people deal with oppression, the fight back, and all the consequences that come with it, good and bad.
We've got Silco and Echo battling it out in Zaun, Jace fighting within Piltover, Caitlyn challenging her own upbringing, and then Jinx, a whole different kind of rebellion born from trauma. Lots to unpack.
And this is where the paper goes even deeper. It argues that Arcane isn't just showing us types of rebellion, but actually two fundamental sides to it. Yeah.
It's like good and bad. Light and dark sides of rebellion.
Kind of, but more like the necessary and the dangerous. And the best way to see that is by comparing some of these characters. So on the one hand, you've got characters like Echo and Caitlyn, right? Their rebellion is constructive. It's guided by morals.
And they want a better future. They're trying to fix the injustices, but that's not the whole story, is it?
Right. The paper's quick to point that out. Then you've got Silco and Jinx. They show the dangerous side of rebellion.
Driven by anger, by trauma, that need for revenge. It's like their actions, even if they want change, they end up creating more chaos, more suffering.
Exactly. And it's not just about these individual characters. The paper goes on to talk about this idea of a cycle of rebellion.
Oh, interesting. Like a pattern that keeps repeating.
Yeah, they call it the cyclical entrapment.
Yeah.
You can see it most clearly in the relationship between Piltover and Zaun.
So Piltover cracks down, Zaun rebels, and that just makes Piltover tighten its control even more.
Exactly. It creates this feedback loop where each side fuels the other's fear and prejudice.
It's like every act of rebellion, no matter how well-intentioned, just ends up strengthening the very system it's trying to dismantle.
That's a great point. The paper really emphasizes that. And the cyclical entrapment, it's not just limited to the big picture conflict between Piltover and Zaun.
You mean it shows up in the characters' personal relationships, too?
Exactly. Take V and Jinx, for example.
Oh, their relationship is heartbreaking. Constantly trying to protect each other, but just ending up hurting each other more.
They're caught in this cycle of love and pain. You know, each action, even if it's meant to help, just pushes them further apart.
So what's the point, then? Is the paper saying that all rebellion is doomed to fail, that it always leads to more suffering?
Not necessarily. I wouldn't say it takes that kind of view. It acknowledges the danger, especially when rebellion is driven by anger, by vengeance.
But it also suggests That understanding these patterns, these cycles, is crucial for breaking free from them.
Exactly. Awareness is key. By recognizing these patterns, we can start to make more conscious choices about how we resist, how we fight back.
So we can learn from the mistakes of characters like Silco and Jinx and try to be more like Echo and Caitlyn.
Right. It's not about giving up the fight. It's about choosing our methods carefully and being mindful of the potential consequences.
So we need to understand the dangers of this cyclical entrapment, but how do we actually break free from it? How do we rebel without just making things worse?
Well, that's where the paper gets really interesting. It suggests that Arcane actually offers us a way out, a shift in perspective.
So we've talked about the good, the bad, the cycles of rebellion, but how do we actually break free from those destructive patterns? What does Arcane offer as a solution?
The paper suggests that Arcane points towards a way out by shifting our perspective. It's not just about tearing down what's there, it's about building something new, something better.
So not just rebellion, but creation.
Exactly. They use this term constructive resistance. It's about channeling that energy of rebellion into positive action. Creating systems and communities that embody the values we want to see.
So instead of focusing on what we're against, we focus on what we're for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you see that with Echo and the Firelights, right? They're not just fighting Piltover, they're creating this space in Zaun, a community based on mutual support, protection, hope.
It's like they're showing that rebellion can be about more than just anger and destruction. It can be about creating something good, something hopeful, even in the darkest places.
And that's a really powerful message, right? Even when facing oppression, we have the power to create, to build, to imagine something better.
So it's not about erasing the past, but learning from it.
Hmm.
Using that knowledge to build a better future, a more just world for everyone.
Exactly. And I think Arcane is giving us permission to be hopeful, to believe that change is possible, even when things seem bleak.
But it's not just about blind optimism. It's about taking action, actively working towards that change.
Absolutely. Arcane is a call to action. It's a challenge to look at our own world and ask, what can I do to break those cycles? How can I contribute to a better future?
It's like realizing we all have a role to play, right? Whether it's big acts of resistance or just small acts of kindness, of compassion.
Exactly. And it starts in our own communities. The way we treat each other, the systems we support, the values we choose to live by.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the different ways we can approach these ideas of rebellion and resistance. It's not black and white. It's complex, and ultimately it's about finding ways to create a world that's more just and equitable for everyone.
And it's a reminder that hope is never lost. As long as we keep questioning, keep striving, keep believing in a better future, we can break free from those destructive cycles and create a world where everyone can thrive.
That's a powerful message. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Arcane. Hopefully you've got some new perspectives, some food for thought.
Remember, change starts with each of us. Be the change you want to see.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep fighting the good fight, and keep believing in the power